Good morning, everybody. My name is David Newman. I'm a park ranger with the National Park Service at Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site, and I can see you all in your classroom. So as we move forward with the program today, if you all have questions, I see you guys waving. Hi. If you guys have questions, or if you'd like to answer a question, just approach the camera, and I'll call on you, and we'll move from there. So today's program is actually called The Mystery of William Jones, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about William and investigating his life and what may have happened to him. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention that I am at the Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site in St. Louis, Missouri. And behind me, you might be able to see it. I'm going to zoom in here. Whoops, that's the wrong preset. Let me get to the right one here. Behind me, you're going to be able to see Ulysses S. Grant's home in just a moment. So this is the home where Ulysses S. Grant lived for almost 6 years before the American Civil War and before becoming the famous general and president that we know him as today. So that's where I'm located, and the setting of the investigation that we're going to be working on today is in and around Whitehaven and the St. Louis area. So there is a local connection to the park where I'm stationed here. So what I'm going to ask first is that we all open our documents packets. So if you all have the materials that I sent out yesterday, go ahead and open your documents packet to the first document, which is going to be a census record. And we're going to take a little bit of time to look at the census and figure out exactly what information we can discover on a census record. And then we'll talk a little bit more about William and how he's related to all that. So just give me a hand in the air if everybody has their document packets ready and is ready to get started. Okay, all right, I'm seeing hands going up. And it looks like Arts Academy is getting their materials together. So I'll give it just a couple of minutes, or just a couple of seconds here. All right, and Arts Academy, just give me a thumbs up when you guys have your activity packets in hand. Still working on it, okay. Okay, and then while you're looking at your activity packets, or excuse me, your document packet, if you can also take out your question packet here, the activity packet. This is going to have presidents and primary sources and the mystery of William Jones listed at the top, and then you're going to see a set of questions about census records. You'll want to have this document ready as well. So just a show of hands, while we're waiting to get all the documents passed out, how many of you have heard of the census before? This is something that happens every few years. The census is recorded, okay? Very good. So the United States does what they call a census on a regular basis every several years to determine how many people live in this country and how we can best serve the American people who are in our nation at a given time. In the 19th century, census takers would actually walk door to door and record information from what they observed and what they were told by people living at those residences. Today, census records are actually going digital, and they say that by the time the next census is taken, that a lot of folks will actually be submitting their own information online. But in the 19th century, documents like the census that you all are looking at would have all been taken by hand by folks walking door to door and recording the people that they saw and what they heard about the residents of those properties. So again, if you have your documents in hand, just give me a thumbs up and we'll get started. Okay, it looks like pretty much everybody is ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the first set of questions on examining the census. And the first question asks, how old are you? And how do you know your age? So would somebody like to answer that question? How do you know how old you are? And if anybody from Arts Academy or Fireside Elementary there wants to approach the camera, you could answer this question. What we're looking for is how old you are and how you know how old you are. Well, one thing that comes to mind for me is, oh, okay, very good. So tell us how old you are and how you know how old you are. Looks like, okay, so go ahead, Fireside Elementary, and then we'll take an answer from Arts Academy.
I'm 12 years old, and I know that I'm 12 years old because I look at my birth certificate and it says my birthday.
Okay, so first, you know your age, and you know your age because it's on a document. So you have a legal document that says this is when you were born, this is how old you are. But people who were born enslaved didn't have birth certificates. So if you grew up as an enslaved person like William Jones did, he was in slavery, how do you think you might know your age if you didn't have a birth certificate? How do you think you might find that out? Oh, and you know what? I'm having a hard time hearing Fireside Elementary. I'm sorry.
Ask your parents.
You can ask your parents. Okay, so right. So you might ask your parents, and they might say, yeah, I remember that you were born in August of 2004 or whatever, or in those days it might have been August of 1840 or 1830. But yeah, you could ask your parents. Now, if they didn't write that day down, or if they didn't know the day of the week, that might become more difficult. They might be just kind of guessing as to your age. So when these census takers went door to door in the 19th century, and they were trying to find out how many people are living on this piece of property or in this household and how old that person is, how do you think a census taker would gather information about somebody's age? Especially an enslaved person's age. Do you think there would be documentation to support that? No, I'm seeing people shaking their heads no. So how do you think that census taker would determine the age of somebody that they were looking at? Well, one thing is they might ask them, but more often than not, that census taker would just look at the person and guess. I can guess, that you might be 12 years old. Of course, you might be 11, you might be 13, you might even be 14. So I'm going to guess, but it's going to be somewhere in that range, right? So when these census takers are walking around trying to record information, that information might not be 100% correct, especially when it came to the enslaved people who lived on properties and plantations like Whitehaven. So we're going to go ahead and flip to page 2 of your activity packet. We're actually going to look at some of the different categories of information that census takers would have recorded. So starting at the bottom of page 1, actually, and then continuing on to page 2, we're going to see that census takers were required to record 7 pieces of information, including the number of enslaved people at any given residence, the age of that enslaved person, their gender, whether or not they were male or female, the color of that individual, whether or not they were fugitives. If they had run away and were fugitives from the state, they would still be recorded even if they couldn't be found, and the number manumitted. And we're going to talk more about this, but that term means to be set free from slavery. So manumission, that means to be set free from slavery. And then whether or not there was a category for whether or not they were, quote, deaf, dumb, blind, insane, or idiotic. So that was also something that was reported at that time. And under the category of color on the census records of 1850, which are the records we'll be looking at today, the choices were either B for black or M for mulatto, which at the period was a term to describe a person of one white and one black parent, or somebody who was born of one white or one black parent. So these are people, these are some of the descriptions that we're going to be looking at as we move forward with the census records. And I think you'll see what I mean when we actually get into some of these questions. So as I mentioned, the property behind me is where Ulysses S. Grant lived before the American Civil War. I should also add to this that Grant was not living alone. He was actually here with his wife and children, as well as his wife's family. In fact, her father owned this house that's here behind me today. And it was her father, a man named Frederick Dent, who actually owned the majority of the enslaved people living here at Whitehaven. And we'll see that the only enslaved person Ulysses S. Grant himself actually owned was this man named William Jones. So let's take a look at our first document, and I'm actually going to switch my camera view just in case you don't have the document packet in front of you there. Maybe you'll be able to see some of the detail on this census record. So we'll be looking at document number 1 if you want to flip to that document. So let's take a look at the questions on our activities packet. It says, by 1850, Julia had been married to Ulysses S. Grant for 2 years. Their first child was born in May of 1850, while Grant was away with the military. Julia was living at her parents' home in the city. Ulysses S. Grant traveled to the Dent City house in the summer to meet his son, Frederick Dent Grant. Also living in the Dent City home at the time were 2 of Julia's brothers, her 2 sisters, and enslaved African Americans. So the first thing we want to do when we're looking at this document, the census record, is find out when this data or when this information was collected. So can anybody tell me, looking at the top of the census record, when this information was collected? Does anybody see a date on there? And if so, come up to the camera and let us know. Okay, I see some hands at Fireside Elementary, so if you want to come up to the camera and share your answer, that'd be great, and then we can move on to the next question. So did somebody at Fireside know the answer? Oh, here we go.
Is it 1850?
Right, so that's going to be the year, and then do we know the day and the month? It's going to be
The 10th day of September. Oh, I'm on the wrong one.
Right. Yeah, so if we're looking at document 1, it's going to be the 12th day of August, 1850. So we know the year that this was recorded, and we can see that information at the top. And then the next question says, how many total enslaved people are living in the family city house at this time? So this particular document is looking at their city house. How many total enslaved people are actually listed on this document? And we're going to be looking at the chart down below here. So when we look at this chart, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So how many people are actually listed on this document? Well, if we count it up, we can see there are 13 people listed on there. So if we look at the next column over where it says age at the top, we're going to look down and see the different ages of some of these enslaved people. I want to know, looking at this census record, how many enslaved people are actually under the age of 10? So we're going to look on that document and we're going to find out how many of these people are under the age of 10 and then add those up. So go ahead and look at your document and go ahead and just show me with your fingers, just kind of show me a number. How many people are on there? 1, 2. Okay, so I'm seeing 4. Okay, so that's the correct answer. There are 4 people under the age of 10. So there were quite a few enslaved people who were young children living at the Dent City house. That's something we can determine from that. And then what is the age and sex of the enslaved people or the enslaved person that was manumitted? So remember, this is somebody who was set free from slavery. So what was the age and sex of the person who was set free on this document? So look at your columns. You're going to find a column that says number of manumitted.
He was 21 and he was a man.
Right, exactly. So we can determine from that record that there was an enslaved person who was set free by Frederick Dent. He was not sold, he was set free, and that man was 21 years of age, and he was male. So we can determine some details from the census records, but there are other details, like that person's name, that are left completely off of the record. So it is a bit of a mystery when you look at census records as to who this person was, but we can at least find out some basic information about them. And the next question says, what does it mean to be manumitted? We already mentioned that means to be set free from slavery. So if you ever hear somebody talk about manumission, that's what that means. So let's take a look at document 2 now, and this is going to be a census record from the Dent's city house, or excuse me, from their county home. So we're going to take a look at document number 2 now, and we're going to take a look at the questions related to that. The first question is, how many total enslaved people are living at Whitehaven in 1850? So now we're actually looking at the census related to President Grant's home, the one that's right here behind me, and we're going to try to find out how many enslaved people are living on the property. So just like that first record, we're going to count up that first column and see how many people are actually living on the property. And if we count that up, we should come up with the number 17. So again, what we want to do is then find out the age and sex, this time of the oldest enslaved person living at Whitehaven. So try to figure out who is the oldest person there, and then we're going to determine what their age and gender is going to be. And if you think you know the answer, come on up to the camera and share with the group. Okay, looks like Fireside's got an answer for us. Oh, Arts Academy too. You know what? Let's take an answer from Arts Academy. We haven't got it from you all yet.
She was 60 and female.
Okay, so this is a 60-year-old female woman living at Whitehaven. Okay, and so the next question says, were any enslaved people from Whitehaven manumitted? So were any of the people at Whitehaven set free? Give me a, okay, very good. We've got somebody from Arts Academy again.
1.
Okay, exactly. So we have one 35-year-old male who was set free from slavery at Whitehaven, and we're going to learn that Ulysses S. Grant did eventually manumit William Jones, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that document soon. So for a moment, we want to look at both of these two documents, look at both 1850 census records. In total, at both the city house and the country home Whitehaven, how many enslaved people did Julia's father, Frederick Dent own? So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a total number of the enslaved people on both of these documents. If we add both of those up, we should come up with the number 30. Is that what you all came up with? Okay, I see heads nodding. So we've come up with the number 30. So that's how we look at these documents. And so now what we want to do is we're going to look at some of these documents and try to see if we can find William Jones, the enslaved person that Ulysses S. Grant owned, on this document. So one thing we know, and I'm going to move forward just a little bit, get ahead of ourselves. One thing we know is that William Jones was purchased by Ulysses S. Grant from his father-in-law, Frederick Dent. So, and he was purchased sometime in the 1850s. So if we look at these census records, we should see William Jones somewhere on this record. So, So actually what I would like to do before we actually examine the records again is I would like to look at document number 3. So go ahead and flip to document number 3, and we're going to look at this manumission of William Jones. And you'll notice the first page of document 3 is the handwritten document from Ulysses S. Grant. In fact, I'll pull it up here. So you should be seeing this handwritten document. It's very scripty, it's in cursive, and it should be difficult to read, I think, for a lot of people in this day and age. But I wanted you guys to be able to see what Grant's handwriting looked like. So we're actually going to turn to the second page of document 3, and this is going to be a transcription or a copy of Grant's document typewritten. So it's a little bit easier to read. So when we look at this document, it's going to tell us a few different things about William Jones. So I'm going to go ahead and start by just reading the Manumission Document. And this is a legal document in which Grant is setting the only slave he ever owned free. So it starts, known all persons by these presents that I, Ulysses S. Grant, of the city and county of St. Louis in the state of Missouri, for diverse good and valuable considerations, me hereunto moving, do hereby emancipate and set free from slavery my Negro man William, sometimes called William Jones, of mulatto complexion, about 35 years and about 5 feet 7 inches in height, and being the same slave purchased by me from Frederick Dent. And I do hereby emancipate and set free said William from slavery forever. In testimony whereof I hereto set my hand and seal at St. Louis this day of March AD 1859. So there's actually a lot of good information in this document, and we're going to try to piece some of this apart. So how old does Ulysses S. Grant say William is at the time of his emancipation or manumission? And by the way, emancipation is another term for the freeing of an enslaved person. So if we use that term emancipation versus manumission, they essentially mean the same thing. So how old did Ulysses S. Grant say William was at the time that he was set free? And he doesn't know the exact age, but he does say that he's about a certain age. Okay, Arts Academy?
He was 35.
Okay, and also maybe while I've got you up here, how does Grant describe William Jones? So he is 35 years of age, we know that much. How is he described physically by Ulysses S. Grant?
He's about 5 feet 7.
Okay, about 5 feet 7, so we know his height.
Describes his color.
He describes his color, right? So he's described as somebody from one white parent and one African American parent. And what do we know about how Ulysses S. Grant acquired this person, William?
Purchased him.
He purchased him, right? So it wasn't a gift. A lot of historians for years said that he was a wedding present. We know that's not true. Grant himself says that he was purchased from who? Frederick Dent, right? Frederick is going to be his father-in-law and his wife's father. So we know a few things. We know that William's 35. We know that he is of, quote, mulatto complexion. We know that he is 35 years of age. We know that he's 5'7", and that he was purchased from Frederick Dent. So now we're going to look at those 1850 census records, like I mentioned, and we're going to try and figure out where William is on these census records. So go ahead and flip back to documents number 1 and 2. We're going to try to figure out where William is on these documents. So first, what do you think would be the easiest identifier of William Jones on these documents? We know that he's about 35 years of age. So my thinking is that that's probably going to be the easiest way to find him. But that was in 1859. And we're looking at a record that was recorded in 1850. So it's going to take a little simple math. And so what we're going to have to do is subtract 9 from 35, which is going to give us about 26. right? He's going to be somewhere around 26 years of age. So we're going to be looking for somebody that matches the age description first. And remember, these might not be perfect. It might be that they recorded him, you know, at 24. It might be that he's recorded at 27. But we're looking for somebody in that range. And then once you've found somebody that fits that age range, you want to look for somebody that is, first of all, male, and then also the same skin color as William Jones is described in the Manumission Document. So looking at these two documents, do we see anybody that matches all of those categories? And because we don't have names on these records, if you want to use the number next to that person, that would be fine because we don't have names here. So first tell us what document it's on, and then tell us which number that enslaved person is on the record.
All right, it's on document 2, number 5.
Okay. So document 2 and then number what?
5.
5, exactly, right. So we can see on document number 2, if you go down to the person listed as number 5, that person's age is listed as 24, which fits into our age range. That person is listed as male, and their skin color is listed as, quote, mulatto. So we know that that fits in with everything that is on the Manumission Document. So we can look at document number 2, and it's pretty safe to assume that that person, number 5, is William Jones. And from this, we can learn that William was not living at Dent City House, but rather at Whitehaven, which would have been the same place where Ulysses S. Grant was living in the 1850s. So it's likely Ulysses S. Grant and William met while living on the property that you see here behind me. So we can find out by identifying him on that census record where he lived and how Ulysses S. Grant and William may have met. So now we're going to move on. What information from the Manumission Document brought us to that conclusion? We talked about that. The age listed on there is 24. What color is listed for him? We mentioned that. So how does this information differ from the description given for William Jones in the Manumission Document? What is maybe one difference that you all noticed? And it's going to be a pretty small difference, but what is one difference that you all noticed between the two? So there's a little bit of a disconnect between what Grant is telling us about William's age and what we see on the document, just by a couple of years. But that can make a big difference when we're trying to investigate somebody's life. Even, you know, being off by a year or two can make things a little more challenging. So hopefully you all are starting to see some of the challenges when it comes to investigating people, historical people, using documents like census records, which weren't always the best documents, or at least not the most detailed documents. So now we're going to turn to page 4 in our activity packet, where it says William Jones was manumitted by Ulysses S. Grant in 1859. So what became of him? So we know that he was set free by Ulysses S. Grant in 1859. We know that he lived at Whitehaven in 1850, and we know a few things about his description, the age, the height, and all of that. But what happened to him after he was set free from slavery? And this is where we as historians are really quite stumped. But there's some evidence out there that might point in one direction or another and help round out this picture of who William Jones was and what may have happened to him after he was set free from slavery. So the rest of our program today is going to be trying to figure out what happened to William after slavery. And we're going to be looking at a few different types of documents that might help us piece that information together. So the next document that we'll be looking at is document 4, and this is the 1860 St. Louis City Directory. So go ahead and open up document number 4, and we're going to look at that pretty soon here. So after the end of slavery, the whereabouts of William Jones became somewhat mysterious. Like I say, for decades, historians have debated what happened to him. After emancipation, some freedmen like William would travel great distances from the plantations where they were enslaved. They just wanted to get as far from that life as possible, whereas others would settle in nearby cities and communities, perhaps even remaining on the plantations in which they were enslaved in some rare cases. So we're going to look at a city directory, and this document might suggest whether or not William stayed close to home or whether or not he moved further from slavery. So the first thing I want us to look at is the list of Joneses, and I'm actually going to pull up my document here on the camera. So we're going to look at this list of William Joneses, and looking at this list, we're going to try and determine which one of these could possibly be the William Jones manumitted by Ulysses S. Grant. So looking down this list, let's see if there's any clues that might suggest which of these William Jones could be the William that Ulysses S. Grant set free. So these were all William Joneses living in St. Louis, and there's more than a dozen of them, but there is only one William Jones listed in a particular category. So does anybody see a particular William Jones on this list that could be the William Jones that we're investigating today, and how did you come to that conclusion?
On the document, there's only one of the William Joneses listed as colored.
Right, exactly. So out of more than a dozen William Joneses living in the city of St. Louis at this time, only one of those more than a dozen people is listed in the category of colored. So if this is if William Jones is on this list, it is safe to assume that that is the William Jones we're discussing. And if you look in the next category over, what is his profession? Because we're looking at this and we're looking at a lot of different jobs and professions on this list. What is that William Jones's profession on that list? So I'm looking at some of the other William Joneses, and for instance, the William Jones below him is listed as having a profession as a rolling mill. The person below that has a profession as a dentist. So what would be the profession of the person that we're looking at here? It looks like somebody from Arts Academy.
He was a driver.
He was a driver, right? And we're not talking about driving a truck or a bus or anything, or a car even for a living. We're not talking about Uber. We're talking about driving a horse and buggy, or maybe even driving a team of horses. And one thing that's safe to assume is that if William Jones lived here on the property, which was a plantation, a working farm, he likely had exposure to a lot of livestock here, and perhaps a certain skill level when it came to working with livestock, including horses. So it would make sense for this to be the same William Jones that was manumitted by Ulysses S. Grant in 1859. So looking at the city directory here, it is safe to assume for the time being that this may be the same William Jones that Ulysses S. Grant freed from slavery. Are there other resources available that might help us determine if this is the same William Jones? Well, we can look at some other documents here. And before we do, I actually want to call your attention to the directory again. Next to the section where it says that he was a driver, we're also going to see an address. It's listed as Rear 100 Myrtle Street. So knowing his address, what would be the next document we might look at to try and find out more about this William Jones? What do you think would be a good next document for us to look at? Well, if you flip to the next page, you'll see that we actually have a map of St. Louis in 1857. So very close to the time in which William was set free from slavery. And what I've done with this map is I've zoomed in on the section that includes Myrtle Street. So we're going to be looking at this document number 5, historic maps. So city maps are often detailed enough to see street names, voting wards, and blocks. In pictorial perspective maps, like the one we'll be looking at on document 6, business owners often pay to have their businesses listed and labeled. Most of the detailed pictorial maps, on most of the most detailed pictorial maps, street life is also sometimes visible. So we've got 2 maps. One is more of a street map and the other is a pictorial map. And with these 2, hopefully we're going to be able to find out more about William and the place where he lived. So we're piecing together a story of this man, his profession, the neighborhood in which he lived, and all of this is going to tell us more about what William's life was like after the end of slavery. So look at the 1857 map of the city of St. Louis, and that's document 5. Circle the location on your map of 100 Myrtle Street. So looking at Myrtle Street, what we're going to do is be looking for the first block. That's going to be the 100 block of Myrtle Street. Go ahead and circle that first block of Myrtle Street closest to the river. Okay, so you should have circled the block that's labeled with first on it and also has Myrtle Street connected with it. So we've circled that. And so now we want to know what businesses are located, or excuse me, I skipped a question. So we were going to try to figure out what street was located immediately south of Myrtle Street. So what street is just south of Myrtle Street on this overhead view of St. Louis? Sorry about that, I skipped a question. So if we look on this map, we're looking at Myrtle, and then we're looking at that street that's just below. So what street is just south of Myrtle Street? And I'll go ahead and take an answer from one of the classes here. It looks like Reeves Academy?
Spruce Street.
So that's going to be Spruce Street, exactly. So that's going to be the street south of Myrtle Street. So that just kind of helps get our bearings. So now what we want to do is look at document 6. So this is actually where we're going to circle the city block. And I do apologize, I scooted ahead to that question and we weren't quite ready for that. But yeah, go ahead and circle on this map the block with the location of 100 Myrtle Street. So what we know is that Spruce is the street south of Myrtle. So find Almond, Spruce, and then Myrtle on the map and circle the first block, the one closest to the levee and the riverfront there. And the river that we're looking at is actually going to be the Mississippi River, just in case you were wondering. So we've circled that block, and now we're going to try to figure out what business was located at this block. So who are his neighbors? You know, William Jones is living right behind these businesses. So we're going to try to figure out, looking at this map, what businesses he would have been in contact with on a daily basis. And to do so, we're going to look for a number. So if you look closely at this map, you might notice a small in white print number 46 on the roof of a business. And then there's also a 47 on the roof of this business. So we're going to try to figure out what are these businesses, and to do so, we're going to look at the bottom of the page, and what we want to do is just figure out what that first business is. So what is number 46 on this map? And we can look down at the bottom at our answer key. So go ahead and look at that answer key and let me know what you figure out there. What is number 46 on the key at the bottom? So if you're looking at the bottom, it's going to be the center column, And if we look all the way to the bottom of that, it says Bauer and Bull. So we're looking at that business, and if we were to do more research, we could find out that that was actually a shipping and distribution company. So it's likely that they would have had a lot of shipping materials, crates, barrels, maybe goods that they were shipping along the Mississippi River, including things like fish and perhaps hardware and maybe even fresh hides from animals that fur trappers have brought to the St. Louis area. So there could be a mix of smells and sights that we would see with a business like that. Let's look at number 47, and it looks like that's Geo Bain and Company. So these are some of the businesses nearby William Jones, and he actually would have been living in the alley right behind these buildings. And I don't know if you can tell, but if you look at this map, and I'm going to zoom in so that you can all see, there actually is kind of an alley or kind of a, yeah, just like an alley section back there. So let me zoom in and see if I can get to that section there. So we're looking, okay, so that's as far as it's going to let me zoom. But what we're looking at is this area right between, excuse me, can't even see that, can you? What we're looking at is this area right in the middle of those buildings. So this is where William would have been living, right amongst all of these businesses and other African-American residents. And it's worth mentioning that the neighborhood was both commercial and residential. So where it says was the neighborhood around Williams' homes primarily commercial or residential, it was in fact both. And we talked about some of the types of things that were being sold and the types of things that these businesses were handling. So what do you all think that neighborhood would have smelled like at the time that William was there? And come on up and just let us know if you think you know what that neighborhood may have smelled like. And it could be good, bad, and you can maybe describe some of the smells you think he may have been experiencing in that neighborhood. So I see we've got somebody at Fireside Elementary. So tell us if you think it would have smelled good or bad, and then what types of smells we may have experienced if we lived in Williams' neighborhood back then. So it looks like we've got somebody at Fireside there.
Okay. It would probably smell like fish, and the smell would be pretty bad. Yeah, so it might smell like fish, and we're close to the river too. So do you think that might make a difference? Yeah, it would smell like even more fishy. It might smell like even more like fishy, right? And you're going to have a lot of fish on the riverfront. You might also have a lot of fireplaces burning, because remember, this is before air conditioners, so people were heating their homes with fireplaces. So you would have been smelling a lot of smoke and burning wood and coal mixed with a fishy smell. Does it sound like Williams' neighborhood was a place where many of us would want to live? No. Not exactly, right? And oftentimes African Americans, because of segregation and because of a sense of community, lived in areas which weren't necessarily the most desirable. They may have been smelly, they may have been in alleys, but there William would have found perhaps a sense of community with other African Americans who also may have been set free from slavery. And we do know that many of these neighborhoods in which African Americans lived were kind of an accumulation of people who had been set free from slavery and decided to live near one another. So here's what we want to do next. We want to try to figure out, now that we know about William's age, where he lived, where he's living maybe in the 1860s, what we want to do now is figure out more about his profession. We know that on the previous documents that we looked at, that William Jones in the 1860 directory was listed as a driver. But he may not stay a driver forever. That's what he is in 1860.
we're going to try to figure out what other jobs William may have had as well. So we're going to look at William Jones and whether or not he may have actually been a soldier with the U.S. Army. So during the American Civil War, there were units known as the United States Colored Troops, also known as the USCT for short. These were regiments in the United States Army, so in the Union Army, which were primarily composed of African American soldiers. And although members of other minority groups served with the units, they were primarily African American. They were first recruited during the American Civil War, and at the end of that war, in April of 1865, 175 of these United States Colored Troop regiments constituted 1/10 of the manpower in the Union Army, comprising almost 180 men. So during the Civil War, there was a huge, an enormous number of African Americans, either former slaves or free African Americans, who joined the Union Army and served as soldiers. We're going to try and find out if William Jones was one of these soldiers. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at document number 7. And this is another city directory, but this one is from 1865. So we now jumped 5 years forward, and we're going to be looking at a directory from the end of the Civil War. How many William Joneses listed as colored are listed on listed as residents of St. Louis? So that's the first thing we want to figure out, is how many of the William Joneses on this document are listed as colored. How many of these people could be potentially the William Jones that we're looking for? So again, how many of the people listed as William Jones on here are actually listed as colored? I do apologize for that camera movement there. Okay, well, if we look down the list of William Joneses, at least as far as what I can see on the list right now, is that we only have one William Jones, again, listed as colored. So just like the 1860 census, it's going to be pretty easy to identify if this is the same William Jones, what his profession may have been. So next to where it says William Jones colored on your chart, if I can have somebody come up and answer this one, what is the profession listed for that person? So we're looking at the document. What is the profession listed right next to where it says William Jones? And I'm actually on the right-hand column, about halfway down the page, underneath where it says insurance company. It's about halfway down the page, William Jones. What does it say next to that with his profession? What is he listed as doing? Okay, so I can see it looks like a hand is up in the back at Fireside.
All right, call it out, guys. Rivermen, they were saying.
Rivermen, okay. I did not, oh, you know what? So, okay, so I see what you're saying. So actually, I noticed that you all called out the profession of another Jones. This is a Tobias Jones. So we're looking at, we're actually looking for William Jones. So look down that page for a William Jones and look at his profession. What is William Jones's profession there?
Soldier.
Soldier, exactly. So if it's safe to assume that the William Jones listed on the 1860 directory was the William Jones that Ulysses S. Grant set free in 1859, which would make sense, and it's the same William Jones listed on the 1865 directory, then we know that William Jones went from being Ulysses S. Grant's slave to being a driver in 1860, to joining the Union Army during the American Civil War, to being what we discovered, not only a soldier, but a sergeant with the U.S. Colored Troops. So now we're starting to paint a picture of what happened to William after the end of slavery, after he was manumitted from Whitehaven. So again, looking at our question sheet here, how could we find out more about the William Jones listed on the 1865 directory? Well, as historians, what we'll start doing is looking through a number of other records, including court records. So I want to flip to our last document, which is a record that another ranger here at our park discovered when he was researching William Jones. And this is a record from the St. Louis County Record Book, and we're going to be looking at document 8 in your documents book. Court documents have always served as a useful primary source. A primary source is something we look to when we're trying to investigate historical people. These things have been made more accessible with modern technology. So we were actually able to find this document online. These records have become a central source for many researchers in the history and legal field. So when we went to find out more information about William Jones, one of the things we did was search those court records. And when we did a keyword search for William Jones in the St. Louis County Record Book during this period, we actually did discover a William Jones. And again, we can't make a definite connection between the man Grant set free and this William Jones. We don't know that for sure, but it seems likely given the time frame and the fact that there was only one William Jones living in St. Louis that this is the same man. So I'm going to read what this record says. This is describing a legal incident on May 6, 1861. The document read, "Free Negroes whipped. James McDowell, Jesse Manuel, Jerry Wallace, and William Jones, John Carter, Moses Jackson, and William Millen, free Negroes who have been fined and committed to jail for being in this state without license, and brought before the board and being unable to pay their fines or establish a right to license, it is ordered that the county marshal give them 10 lashes each and direct them to leave the state within 3 days."
David,
So
we probably have to wrap it up in about 1 minute.
Okay, so this is the last piece we're going to be looking at. So just really quickly, we're going to look at this document, and then I'll turn you guys loose. Hopefully, though, you guys have learned a little bit about the investigative process when it comes to looking at historical primary documents and learning about a particular individual. And the point I want to stress in this program is that it's not any one particular document that's going to give somebody's whole life story. We can look at a number of documents, from census records to legal court documents to maps and even city directories, and putting all of this information together is really what gives us a holistic picture of somebody's life. And really, in the end, we don't know what happened to William Jones altogether, but as we find pieces of information, we will begin to put together, like I say, this more holistic picture of William. So just really quickly, what date did the incident take place? It was May 6th, 1861, as we know. Where did the incident take place? Was in St. Louis County, and we know that because it's in the St. Louis County Record Book. And what we can learn about this is that William Jones was traveling in St. Louis County. He was stopped and asked for his freedom papers, which were kind of like a green card today. These were papers that enslaved people carried after they were freed from slavery, and he didn't have that paperwork and was then fined, and he couldn't pay his fines, so he was given lashes, he was whipped, and then exiled from the county. So William Jones is a fascinating figure in our area of study here. It's the only slave that Ulysses S. Grant owned and then set free. And I highly encourage you all to continue researching and learning more about Ulysses S. Grant, William Jones, and American history. So again, thank you all very much for being with me today from Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site in St. Louis. I'm signing off now, but I just wanted to thank you guys, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, David.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a great rest of your day.